do want to welcome our two great members, Tony Chaffee, who's General Sales Manager for Eastern Pennsylvania for Adams Outdoor, and Allison Rupi, who's Director of Business Development for Adams Outdoor. They really worked with us over the last couple of weeks to actually put this use case together, and I just want to say thank you to them and introduce them on the call today. About 2.5 weeks ago, we started talking with Tony and Allison about this case study, and we were just brainstorming, and there was this one case we went to and we started talking about some local Toyota dealerships, a group of local Toyota dealers. So it's kind of a regional example, which I thought would be really nice. And I always hear a lot when I'm traveling on the road about dealers and how they like to look at out of home, that they do like out of home. But and this came out in this case study. Before I hand it off to Tony and Allison to get more background, just really stuck with me, the idea that a lot of these dealers, they like out of home, but they want it right by their dealerships. And they even often, like, if there's a group of them, it's like, well, I want it near my dealership versus that dealership, and they're counting numbers. So I think that's really interesting because it talks about an old way of focusing on location versus where we want to push people and help people understand that, yeah, it may be located there, but we're pulling in audience from a lot of different areas. And also now we have the ability to have even more targeted if we focus on different audiences. And so that's some of what the use case is about today. But I do want to hand it off to Allison and Tony to give you a little more richer background on the use case itself, and even what they're planning to do with this data post-call even. So Tony, Allison, and I just want to hand it off to you for a little bit.
Well, thank you, Scott. Again, this is Tony Chaffee, and Allison Rupi and I are very blessed to be on the call today. We've been part of a lot of the most recent calls with Geopath in the training, and to be honest with you, guys do a wonderful job, Scott, Brian, and the team. So we're happy to be here. The thing that Allison and I wanted to do today is, how do you take the data that we know that is, it's surrounding us in everyday life right now, and turn it the conversation to have the data actually matter in a campaign to an advertiser. Because on a local level, national level, or regional level, it's all about the conversation and how can we take that data and help our customers buy more efficiently, help them understand the buy, and honestly have more confidence in our medium. Because at the end of the day, 4 to 5% of all ad spend is in out of home, and I think we all think that that's really, really low. So we'll talk a little bit about the Philadelphia DMA. We are part of it. So we're not just talking about 3 Toyota dealers. We are part of the Philadelphia DMA, which is 6 million people. Our CBSA in Allentown, Bethlehem Easton is 650,000 people in the population, and it has 3 Toyota dealers. And generally, the Toyota group out of Philadelphia, who buys 90% of their $5.8 million spend yearly, is in broadcast TV. Little radio, but mainly TV. So when they buy Philly, we don't have broadcast TV up here, and the 3 dealers usually just get thrown a bone, and here's 4 or 5 billboards or something very site-centric. And that's not okay with us, because the new data at Geopath and what we want to do is change the conversation to more of a broadcast audience conversation. And that's what we're going to try to show you today, because we believe that this is where we could use Geopath data to not only increase the sales, but make a more efficient buy for our advertisers. So I'm gonna turn it over to Allison to talk a little bit about the background on the dealer group, and then show you some really cool epiphanies and some insights that we got from the Geopath data and Scott's team.
Right, just to give a little more color on the background, the 3 dealers here are very site-centric as it relates to their plan. They care very much about where their boards are, how many boards they feel are targeting their location versus the other competitors in the market, and they really want their fair share of their tier 2 dollars that are being spent here. And we wanted to put together a plan with Geopath's help to try to help change that paradigm within their head about where their locations are, going from location to more of an audience. And I loved something that came out of the OAAA call yesterday, or earlier this week, about how this data is allowing us to talk about our audience and how they move as opposed to our inventory. and also something that we're going to talk about today, where they come from with the home location data. And also challenge Geopath to help us focus on behaviors of potential customers versus the demographics, which is what we're so used to using. So we put together a plan working with Geopath based on impressions. We did a 1.5 million impression plan, and that worked out to be 3 static bulletins and 15 posters in the market.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's interesting too, right? So with that, so that sample distribution is that we have it labeled here, that is showing kind of a current buy, right? A normal buy of adults age 18 plus. And then talking with you guys and talking about some of their, the interest of the dealers, right? They want to sell Tundras and more Camrys, kind of some of their big sellers. How do we help them with that? So we worked together and we dug into the Insight Suite, and this is available in the API as well. So just the new audiences, I guess I want to talk about. And we found 2 great audiences that we could use as behavioral targets as well. And as Allison said, we'll show you how that even helps you look at inventory differently and possibly change the conversation with these dealers. So the two kind of behavioral audiences we found are, household plans to buy new used lease truck in the next 12 months, pickup truck, or mid-sized car. So these are potential auto intenders that we want to reach with our advertising. Cool. So the first thing we did is help them, and again, I'll hand it back off to Allison, is just help them by mapping out the dealerships and where they are located.
Yep, you can see the spread of the dealers here in the market is probably similar to other mini markets. You have 3 dealerships here. And when you layer in the inventory on top of this, you can kind of see how it's broken out between the 3 dealerships. We do our very best to get coverage for all 3 dealerships. But at the end of the day, it's really all about the audience and how they move.
And that's where it really became interesting for us, because most RFPs we've gotten, I know we have some national sellers on the call as well, we get how close can you get to the dealership by proximity, 3 miles, 5 miles. Mm-hmm. And while I think that's very important, I think the Geopath data and behavioral data that we have can really stretch that and get into different zip codes and more coverage areas. So that's kind of what we dug up on it. And the 3 dealers, refocusing the conversation on audience, we were able to look at the Geopath data, look at the Tundra demos, the Camry Avalon buyers, and create these new sample maps that I think you'll see that are much more indexed towards audience delivery versus where's my billboard, right side of the road, left side of the road, how close to the dealership, which it doesn't really matter because we're trying to target a consumer who's going to buy a truck or a car. So the next slide, I think, is going to show the newer versions of the map, which we got very, very high reviews from the highest agency for Toyota, because when we first showed this to the person, he said, oh, that's a TV map. That's a coverage map for broadcast. Mm-hmm. I'm like, no, it's a billboard map.
Right. Yeah, and just to jump in, I thought this was really interesting, and talking about how do we refocus the conversation from location to audience, right? That just to give you an explanation of what this is showing. So that purple dot is actually one of the units that was in this buy here, right? And you can see, even if we are still, these are clustered closely to the dealerships and on purpose, but even still, if you dig into any one unit, you can start to see that it's drawing audience from a lot of different zip codes around the area. So it's not just reaching, zip codes that would be going to one dealership. It's reaching zip codes that go to multiple dealerships. So sorry, I just wanted to help kind of add that in as well.
And just to add a little more color on this, every time I show these maps to any customer that I'm working with, they're always blown away. And you can really see the thought process start to change and how they talk about the inventory then, because it's really not about the inventory. They start to talk about, well, where are the people coming from? And we can really start to talk about audience a little more. And I also did an exercise where we looked at the top 4 zip codes with each of the units in this plan and aggregated them together on a heat map within our own software to be able to see the distribution of the entire plan. And that was really eye-opening to take a look at. And when I look at that completed map against our cable footprint map in our market, it's identical. And then the only difference becomes in-house versus out-of-home marketing.
Right.
And efficiencies of cost per thousand too,
Right.
what we deliver.
Right. You know, and just to ask you guys, so like when, you know, this is another unit that we mapped out. For me, it's like, right there, this is drawing audience from those, you know, zip codes where both of those two dealerships are located, or very close to those dealerships are located. And like, if you do get those questions about like, well, this one's closer to that dealership versus my dealership, is this helpful or in changing the conversation about like, great, yeah, it's located there, but it's more about where the audience is coming from?
One thing I can tell you, when we did share this with the representative from the agency, he said, we got to get this to the dealers. We got to show this to the dealers, because he knows how helpful this will be in changing their thought process about the locations.
Right. And I thought this one was really cool too, right? It shows you even how far beyond like the area it's drawing audience from. You know, it's this one doesn't overlap, but it is showing you like it's drawing a pretty big swath of audience.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it shows the audience, it shows the behavioral, you know, depending on what you put in there, but it also shows that billboards have an effect on an area, not just the people who drive by it, by zip code, behavioral studies. And what we're learning from Geopath, and we're going to go into further slides, is how much granular you can get to make your buy that much more efficient. And that's why adding in outdoor activities and other things that we can do now with the filters is just going to make us stand out among other forms of media trying to talk about what they do real well. So
yeah, and so that's what I think. Like that's what I found interesting about this. Is so this is just like what might be a typical buy today. Even being able to change the conversation with today, just around the audience and current buys, that help show that we're pulling audience from other places. And to your point, Tony, now we can even get more efficient and more narrowed and focusing on the actual audiences that they do want to reach. So I'll just give a little bit of background on what we did. So we, you know, in talking with Tony and Allison, we realized, okay, well, let's see if we can target Tundra buyers and where they might be, and would that be a different kind of set of inventory? So we tried to mimic the same set. So just going back to the idea of 15 posters and 3 bulletins, we tried to mimic that in what we were looking for. And so we put in that audience into the Insight Suite and wanted to see, okay, what are those units that are more efficient at reaching people that say they're in the market for buying a truck? And you know, this is where they are. And yeah, you can see it, and I'm going to just show the next map. So that's the current potential buy, the purple, the sample buy, and layered into the with the those that are potentially going to buy a truck in the next 12 months. And
knowing the market,
I shared that with you guys. Just want to get your initial reaction and thoughts on this when you saw that.
You know, when Scott shared this with us, we didn't ask him to do it, but when he did it, it was amazing because we have the market knowledge, like most of you on the call do, that it lined up directly with the Tundra buyers in our market, up near the ski resorts, mountainous areas in Pennsylvania for the Tundra. And then when he skewed it towards the family sedan, it was more residential, high level for the Camry. And so the Geopath data made the buy even much more efficient than even just our 1.5 million impressions plan that we were offering. It was still a very high impression level, still around that 1.2, 1.3 level, but it was skewed towards where they live and play, and using up the inventory. And I call it the inventory DNA, because every billboard has a personality, it has a rating. So it really did help us in trying to make how efficient this buy could be.
Right. And I think you also bring up a really good point too. Yes, we have data, right? But there's still the market knowledge that all of you bring to this that's really important. So it's in our end a science, right? There's still the data can help guide, but it's really that knowledge of the market that also adds something that's irreplaceable too, right? And the data helps affirm, hopefully, with what you know about the market as well, and helps you be more kind of have that support to behind what you're saying, I think.
It does. It absolutely does.
Right. And so you mentioned efficiency too. So we took another couple steps with that. So what we wanted to see was like, okay, this is, we're looking at we're looking at different audiences, right? And I wanted to see, so this is the current sample buy. And as Tony said, it's efficient, right? So what I did is we looked at the current sample buy and we added a new audience, right? We added that pickup truck buyers instead of the adults 18 plus. We wanted to see like how good is this proposed sample buy at reaching that audience, and that's what you see in the highlighted right corner, that 4.7%. So that's essentially like the target comp. So that's like the percent of impressions that are reaching that audience out of the total, right? And this is a very specific audience. So, you're going to see numbers like that. It's really looking at that and the index. So that index, it's 15%. So anything above 100 is over indexing. So these actually are doing really well against reaching that audience. But if you actually look at the more behavioral buy, the more targeted buy, so again, as we said, they're in different parts of the market, you can see it's actually 40%. So it's even like, 30% higher, 30+% higher than the original buy at reaching that audience. So it's more efficient, less wasted impressions against the audience that you're actually trying to reach.
Yeah, that was a real eye opener for us because it really did target much more efficient and we're very happy with our current software by putting in a demos, but a little bit more granular, a little bit more time on the campaign and planning.
Mm-hmm.
The yield is that much better.
Right. And we did the same thing. So we wanted to take a look at mid-size cars. So anybody that might be there, Avalon, Camry buyers as well. And so again, here's a map of when we map out, again, same kind of buy, 15 posters, 3 bulletins. Where does that audience, what are the units that are most efficient at reaching that audience, that mid-sized car buyer audience? And again, layering that against the current sample buy, you see there is some overlap, but it does have a slightly different pattern clustered in a couple different areas. And again, Tony and Allison, I know, given the looking at this map and knowing the market, did that make sense to you when you saw it, and did it kind of affirm things or for you, or fit with what you know of the market?
I would definitely say so. Just in knowing how people are moving around the market, you can kind of see that this would be representative of where you could target someone who would be buying a Camry or an Avalon.
Mm. What we're trying to do early on, I said we're trying to transcend the conversation, the outdoor conversation with potential advertisers, because let's face it, everything we need to know and everything that we want is really in the mind of the advertiser. So for us to be able to interact with them and talk about audience versus site location, size of billboards, it doesn't really matter. So I think what Scott has done is helped us transcend that conversation. And we know that it's working because people are now talking more about impressions. They're talking more about what's my delivery of the audience versus how many billboards are you trying to sell me.
Right. And we went ahead again and did some of the same other analysis. So looking at the target comp and the index. So again, the current buy against that mid-sized audience, fine. It's doing great. It's right on average. It's doing good. But again, getting more targeted is also producing a little more efficiency. So 15% above index, or 14% rather, above index at reaching that audience, that mid-sized car buying audience. And again, that makes sense to me as well. The mid-sized car maybe is a more ubiquitous audience. So that's why it's probably indexing a little more closely to the 18 plus average. But again, it is still more efficient. In the end, this grouping is able to be more efficient against the audience that we're trying to reach. So I do want to pause and just, I know it's been a while we've been talking. Are there any questions?
Yeah,
that have
there's
come
one
up?
that came in. It's a pretty interesting question. It's regarding, somebody mentioned, I think it was Tony, the art and science of out of home, or Scott. And it was basically asking for a unit, for a specific unit, are there best practices for suppliers about the images of the boards and whether quality, how it impacts reach and read and approach, and how people view a board, like sort of the quality of the image or the age of the display and things like that.
You're talking about the actual advertising.
I believe so.
itself,
Yeah,
it
I
seems?
believe so.
So when we're actually doing our measurement, which actually is interesting because that's potentially good segue into the next slide I want to show. But some of the factors that when we're looking at it are more the size, the distance, the speed. All of those factors play a role in how we get to an impression. So our impressions are built on the opportunity to see. So people out there on the road, based on the illumination, the load factor of any vehicle or pedestrians walking, and then the directionality of that sign. But then we also overlay our visibility adjustment index, which gets to those other factors that move you from just being out there to have having that opportunity to see, to being likely to have noted that piece of inventory. That's a key point, likely to have noted. And there's different factors that apply to that, move you from one to the other. And that is like the distance from the road, the size, the angle, the speed you're going, so that dwell time. But the actual creative itself, the brightness of the lights, those don't quite yet play into our into the visibility adjustment index. It is the structure itself, because the advertising can continually change. I don't know if Tony and Allison maybe have more experience in like the other qualitative aspects of things like that may help help with likelihood of noting a piece of inventory. But that's how we do it from the Geopath side.
Well, I would probably stick with what you said, Scott, because obviously we all have different inventory, age of inventory. But I would say that, I think we all try to do our very best to deliver a message on a very good structure and make sure we maintain it. Mm-hmm. Modern technology now with LED lights has made it even much better. Digital has been a game changer for the industry, and it continues to be so. But the biggest factor I see it in a way is the data that you guys are working on for us and changing the conversation, getting out of the site-centric world and more into the audience delivery. That's going to be the biggest thing. It's our number one quest at Adams, and I think I can speak for other billboard companies as well, is that we have to change the conversation. We have to get people to see us more than just a stick on the highway. So that's why, like you said, please continue to explore. That's what we're doing. We don't feel like we have it figured out at Adams. Every day it's a kind of an exploration. But I believe that, if we keep on sharing on calls like this about what's going on, new findings, I'd love to hear what's happening in other billboard companies. I think that's how we're gonna grow this thing together collectively.
Right. And that's my hope. And I do want to invite anyone, if you're on this call today and you're like, hey, I have an interesting use case, I do want to have as many varied examples from the agency side, from the operator side, local, national, regional, as many different examples as we can all kind of collectively put together and share. I think it's really just going to help the industry overall. And that's my hope for these advanced sessions. And, thank you, Tony and Allison, for helping us kind of move along that path.